So what are tables? A table has a few meanings when you look it up on the internet. Words come out like conglomerate, wealth clique, rich family, just to name a few. These conglomerates are mostly family-run businesses that dominate South Korea's economy, and they wield extraordinary influence in South Korean politics. The Chaebol structure usually consists of founding family members being placed in ownership or management positions, and this allows them to maintain control over all their affiliate businesses. Now, simply having a successful business does not make someone a Chaebol. There are some requirements. And one of those requirements are that one or both parents must be CEO of a large company, and that position has to have been inherited from another family member. The company also must have multiple businesses in different areas, and the family members must be CEOs of these affiliates. This way, the family maintains control over every aspect of the business. As of today, there are 45 conglomerates that fit the traditional definition of a chaebol, but I'm only going to talk about the top four. Samsung, which is run by the Lee family, Hyundai, which was founded by Chung Dong-young, SK, which is run by the Chae family, and LG, which is run by the Koo family. So Samsung started off as a small company that exported goods like fruit, dried fish, and noodles primarily to China. Now, however, they deal with things like electronics, insurance, shipbuilding, luxury hotels, hospitals, and they even have an amusement park. Hyundai started off as a small construction business in 1947, but after the Asian financial crisis and the death of the founder, it broke up into 5 distinct firms. And these firms include things like shipbuilding, financials, and electronics. But they are most famous for the Hyundai Motor Group, which is the third largest car maker in the world, as well as Heavy Industries, which is the world's largest shipbuilding company. Next, we have SK, which is also known as SK Holdings. This started as a small textile company after World War II, and they oversee over 80 subsidiaries, with their most famous being SK Telecom, which is the largest wireless carrier in South Korea, as well as SK Hynix, which is a semiconductor company, and they are the world's second largest maker of memory chips. They also have companies in energy, chemical, shipbuilding, insurance, and construction. So last is LG. LG started as a small chemical and plastics company in 1947. They heavily invest in the development of consumer electronics, telecommunication networks, and power generation. However, in 2005, LG split into 2 separate companies, one of which being GS, which is its own separate chaebol, and their core business is energy, retail, sports, and construction. Now that we know what they are, let's get a little bit into the history of chaebols. So it's known that many chaebols date back to the period of Japanese occupation before the end of World War II, and they were said to be modeled after Japan's powerful industrial and financial conglomerates, and these were called zaibatsu. So after the departure of the Japanese, some Korean businessmen were able to acquire their assets, and they transformed them into the chaebols of the 1990s, as well as the ones that we know today. And under the first president, Syngman Rhee, these companies, they received special favors from the government in return for kickbacks and other types of payments. After the military coup in 1961, Park Chung-hee became president, and he had a vision of making South Korea self-sufficient. The South Korean government provided hundreds of millions of dollars in special loans and other financial support to the chaebols in an effort to rebuild the economy. And since these companies did not have any valuable collateral, the government backed these loans for the companies and would pay them back if the company was unable to. And under President Park, export-driven development strategy enterprises like construction, chemicals, and steel flourished, and under this plan, Park prioritized preferential loans to export businesses and insulated domestic industries from external competition. So over time, the chaebol expanded into new industrial sectors and tapped into more lucrative foreign markets, and this caused the exports to grow from 4% of the GDP in 1961 to over 40% by 2016, which was one of the highest rates globally. The average income of South Koreans rose from $120 a year to over $27,000 in a relatively short time, and this lifted millions out of poverty. The parallel rise of the Chaebols and the economy embedded the conglomerates into a new narrative of South Korea's post-war rejuvenation. So the democratic transition in South Korea in the late 1980s only slightly affected the Chaebol system. Democratization created strong labor unions that fought for higher wages, better working conditions, and an unraveling of the close relationship between the government and Chaebols. And the 1997 Asian financial crisis really tested South Korea's Chaebol-dominant economic model. And leading up to the crisis, banks were lending heavily to Chaebol so that they could expand into new sectors more quickly. When the crisis hit, countries across the region saw plummeting currencies, debt crises, and recessions. And because of this, 15 of the top 30 conglomerates were left to go bankrupt. Let's speak about the close relationship that Chaebols and the South Korean government have. They have a very symbiotic relationship. This causes many politicians to sometimes come to Chaebols for financial support during campaigns, and this leads to the Chaebols lobbying for favorable legislation as well as public policy in exchange for their support. Critics say that the close relationship between Seoul and its Chaebols has given way to a culture of corruption, things like embezzlement, bribery, and tax evasion. And the devastation that these relationships can have can be seen with President or former President Park Geun-hye, sorry. She was sentenced in 2018 to 25 years in prison for abuse of power, bribery, coercion, and leaking government secrets, sometimes to Chaebols. And that sentence was reduced to 20 years in 2020 after she appealed her sentence. Tables of today and reform. So the sales revenue earned by the top 10 Chaebols account for 67.8% of the country's GDP, with their assets equaling 110% of the GDP. Samsung's assets alone account for 42%. Another problem that they're having is Chaebols are also starting to ship many jobs out of the country, thereby raising the rate of unemployment. Most small and mid-sized companies in South Korea struggle with lower revenue, and even though these companies account for nearly 88% of the total employment, they only pay, on average, 63% of what Chaebols pay for similar work. The small and mid-sized companies account for less than 38% of the country's exports. So when President Moon Jae-in came into power, he had a mandate to sever the government-Chaebol nexus and crack down on corruption. He vowed to end the practice of pardoning convicted executives, raise the minimum wage, and modestly boost the corporate tax rate from 22% to 25%. However, his ability to begin these reforms has been undermined by his party's lack of a majority in parliament, where Chaebols have a hold over many members. Reform will not come easy given that family ties connect the highest rungs of South Korean society, and politicians who call for reform could make enemies out of in-laws, friends, or siblings. The Chaebols have voiced their opinion for limiting reform. Chaebol leaders and conservative lawmakers assert that proposals to regulate Chaebols would damage South Korea's economy, but many say that this consequence would be manageable. They believe that the Chaebols are actually causing the South Korean economy to hit a limit. And the government, however, is implementing soft but lasting reforms that may change Chaebol conduct as well as the way the government interacts with them. In conclusion, looking at South Korea today, you would never know of its difficult beginnings. A country ravaged by war, now a land of prosperity and innovation. Today it stands as a shining example of what determination and unity can do, what can be achieved when people have a common dream. South Korea owes a great deal to its Chaebols. However, the Chaebols and the South Korean citizens must find a path into the future that is beneficial for all, a way to coexist so that together they can continue to grow South Korea.